Darkwing Duck is back. That's right. The Daring Duck of Mystery is starring in 3 brand new collected editions, courtesy of Dynamite Entertainment. From his debut limited series from 1991, all the way to this year's Justice Ducks, this Kickstarter campaign is bringing you all the mallard you can handle, with offerings to fit every price point. To back the campaign and secure your copies, visit comicsaredope.com/darkwing. That's comicsaredope.com/darkwing. Now let's start the show. Well, guys, tonight, this morning, whenever you're listening to this, it's a special episode. It's always fun when I get to speak to the homies. And at this point, if you've been watching the channel, you've been listening to the show for a while, then you know who the homies are. But here to talk about their newest Kickstarter project, Elton, I've got writers Wolly McNair and David Rucker, and the spliff star of the group tonight is my man Ace Blade, Danny Quick, all here. Welcome, gentlemen. How you guys doing?
Good,
Man.
solid.
Always good to be on Comics Are Dope, man. Thank you for continuing to have us and always support indie comics, man. Glad to be talking to you again.
Oh, it's no problem at all, man. I enjoy this part of the job. So just full transparency, as we are recording this, we're about a week and a half out from Heroes Con, a little bit more, which Danny's not joining us this year. He decided to go on a cruise or something, you know. I'll be there. What was that?
I was gonna say it wasn't completely my decision. I'll just say that I was overruled in my own house, and that's that's how
it was his decision. He made a call.
Listen, man, I get it. It's Father's Day weekend. It's always tough. Always tough.
Sure.
Like the first Heroes Con I went to, Squeak took her first steps that weekend.
Oh, that's right. I remember you telling me about
and
that.
I'm like, I'm so mad because I literally have not left my house in 3 years, and all of a sudden, right?
Mm-hmm.
Second Heroes Con, got some other unfortunate news, but nothing crazy family oriented in that way. So I can understand wanting to be with the family for Father's Day. But if they find a different weekend, it is absolutely hands down second greatest day of the year, right? Like you got to count your wedding anniversary as first, right? And then it's Heroes Con. But anyway, so Heroes Con is coming up. If you guys are joining us, then come see me and my man Wolly McNair, who will be in the building. David, are you joining us as well?
It depends on how my health is. I think we are going to try to get there on Father's Day, like on Sunday, but it just depends on how I'm feeling.
Got you, man. Awesome. So with that, I should make a proper introduction. Like I said, we've got my man Danny Quick here, who is, what are we calling you? The CEO of Bequest Studios?
I'm one of the founders.
Yeah, he's the CEO of Bequest Studios, and he's David Rucker's assistant.
No, what? No, I got demoted. To David Rucker.
You got dual positions, yo.
I'm nobody's assistant. I just try to help where I can. So on behalf of Bequest Studios, I just want to keep these two in line, man, because you get these two talking and they just get to throwing out stuff. So I'm just here to make sure nobody gets canceled tonight. That's all I'm here for.
Nice.
Okay.
And so while a lot of you guys will know Wolly as an artist and character designer, he and David Rucker are actually the co-writers of Elton, Broken City, which is live on Kickstarter right now. At the time of this recording, which is about 2 weeks before you guys hear it, we're at about $2,400 on the campaign. So we absolutely need your support to the tune of a little over $1,100. It's a little under, but going over is never going to hurt anybody, right? So hopefully you guys will jump to Kickstarter, and if nothing else, this conversation will convince you. But again, man, welcome, David, since this is your first time on the show.
Thank you very much.
No problem at all. So why don't we talk a little bit about how the idea for Elton came together?
Wolly?
So it's, me and David have some slight discrepancies on who initiated the move, but I credit the idea coming from him. But essentially, I met David at Rebel Based Comics and Toys, which is a comic book shop here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we just started chopping it up, led to building. He was doing, he's still working on, but he had a book called Decimation Earth that was in progress. We just started chopping it up about comics and the process and yada yada yada. So I told him, hey man, you should come to a couple of shows and kind of get a vibe for these conventions. So he came to a few of them with me. Fayetteville was one of the ones he came to, and that gave him a chance to kind of see a little bit of the area that I was born in, some of the background, meet a few of my uncles, my father, a couple people here and there, and it kind of started a conversation about Lumberton. Lumberton, North Carolina, is very much the inspiration for Elton, and that started the conversation, which started us kind of going into trying to figure out what a book could be based in this location.
Got you. So for those who don't know, right, Lumberton is your hometown, right?
Yeah, it's where I was born, birthplace for sure.
Got you. And so what is it about Lumberton so it's crazy North Carolina talk right now. The only thing I know about Lumberton is that when I was a kid, there were some police officers who were killed in the line of duty in Lumberton, and they ended up like naming a bridge after them, which I want to say that bridge is on I-40. But anyway, super deep cut. But what is it about Lumberton that one inspires you and inspired the story?
Well, I mean, for me, it's just home. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I was raised back and forth between Lumberton and Charlotte, and Charlotte has always popped up in some form or fashion in projects that I worked on, and small things here and there in reference to Lumberton, but never had a chance to really do something that explored or defined where I was born. And when I would look around in the world, when I would look around and hear conversations, anytime Lumberton came up, it was always from a negative standpoint. It was always about the danger, how rough it was, about, Michael Jordan's father getting killed in the area. My wife literally had a safety class with her job where an out-of-town sheriff came in and started naming the worst places to go, like how the most dangerous places to be, and Lumberton was on his top of the list. Like, yo, don't even stop in Lumberton. If you don't know anybody, if you ain't there to see nobody, don't be there. So even though some of those things are truth, there's the other side of it too. And for me, like being able to tell a story that dives into some of those tough subjects, but also explain why situations have come to that point, why some things are to that degree. It's not like people just woke up and was like, yo, we want to be the toughest city on the planet. There are realities that people face. And even amongst those situations that may be dangerous to some, it becomes normal life to others. And so wanting to explore that and explore community and explore the realities of survival and just making it in a place that's often forgotten or not spoken of in a positive light, when reality is there's tough things about almost anywhere you go. You know what I mean? So, we just wanted to show a little bit of all of that, because I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for Lumberton. You know what I'm saying? Like, it played a huge part in a certain chapter in my life. You know what I mean? So this book gives a chance to pay homage to that, show respect to that, while at the same time putting together something cool that anybody could relate to from different perspectives.
Got you. Now, David, this is our first time meeting. And so, and I didn't know you were joining us tonight, so I had to do my research on you like super quickly, right? But you are also the writer of Decimation Earth, which is not a book that I've read. I just recently picked up Acolyte, which is also published by Concrete Comics. And there's anything I could say about Concrete Comics, at least from what I've read, right, is that you associate it with like super high quality, especially for an indie company, portraying characters of color, right? What is it about Wolly that made you want to team up based on the sort of pedigree you've earned so far?
Well, I think the reason why I teamed up Wolly was, number one, that we both when we started talking about Elton, I think it took us about a year, maybe year and a half, 2 years to come to fruition to where we are. We had a vision of what we wanted this story to be. It's a little different from what I wrote with Concrete, and with that said, Decimation Earth is one of the few books over at Concrete that is not a traditional Concrete book. You know, traditional Concrete books are mostly superheroes. Decimation Earth is a cosmic horror, dark noir, which is more, I guess, requires you to pay. It's really deep as far as in the horror genre. So which is different from like Acolyte, it's different from Odina, it's different from Primate, or even Jamal Lessie's book. It's its own unique story. So when working with Wolly, Elton Broken City is its own unique story. It is not a hero book. As a matter of fact, our character is not even considered a superhero. And as Wolly and I like to say, it's a cross between The Wire and Daredevil on Netflix season 1. So this is more of an, when we start working on this, I guess you could say it was an opus or a love letter to shows like Snowfall, The Wire, in that genre. And it gave me an opportunity to stretch my writing skills and to work with someone who not only could write, but also had an artist's eye. Because Wolly is an artist. So with that said, when co-writing with Wolly and sitting down, writing out the script, him having that visual eye helps with the way we design the panels for the artists. You know, I could say something to Wolly, hey, let's do X in this panel 1, and Wolly will say to me, well, hey, Dave, we got to break this up, because we can't necessarily do that all in one panel. We're going to have to do 3 panels. Or he'll simply say, as we walk through, he's like, I like the vision and where we're going with this script, but I think we can do more in 3 panels than we can do in 5 panels. So that's one of the reasons that I enjoyed working with Wolly, why I was attracted to work with Wolly, because his artistic eye, his ability to tell a story, and his authenticity in this book. And those are one of the many reasons why.
Got you. So Elton is the story of Jamal Thompson. What can you tell us about Jamal?
Jamal is a very interesting character, because there's a lot of backdrop in Jamal's history that comes from Wolly's experiences in Lumberton, or experiences from friends and family that live in Lumberton that helped develop Jamal. There's also pieces of Jamal that are Wolly and pieces of Jamal that are me from our personal experience. For instance, him being a veteran, that is part of some of my experience of being in the Marine Corps. His experiences of how he moves in the environment in Elton and how he interacts with people is from Wolly's experience with his family, with his friends. So I think we find Jamal as a very interesting character, because when we first see Jamal, he is already the hero, already known as the Remnant, which is what the people of Elton have named him. And we learn the reasons what led him to becoming Remnant. We give you little glimpses of that, of his childhood, of his time in the military. And we know that this Jamal has experienced things that have been tragic and violent in his life as a child into his adulthood, which he tried to get away with by going to school. We realized, and then you see, school didn't work out, so he went to the military, where he saw violence and tragedy there, and realizing the military was not necessarily, you know, wasn't what he thought it would be. And he comes back to Elton and sees Elton from a different view, from being in the military, from traveling around the world. And he comes back to Elton and sees Elton and picks up and has a tragedy that happens to him while he's there, and he experiences some of the things that he left behind. And I'll let you pick up from there, Wally.
I mean, you know, that's the core. I mean, he's a cat who grew up Southside Lumberton, you know, went into sports, which is based on a close cousin of mine, Adam Thompson, played ball. That didn't quite work out when he got into school, decided to go into the military, excelled in the military, but like David said, realized that just wasn't really it. You know, always a good person, always a stand-up person, a solid person, but as you grow, your life starts to change. You start to have to change and adapt and figure out how to maneuver through the environment and things that you're surrounded by. So as that is happening, and he starts to try to figure out, you know, what's left of who he is and who he was, and what he wants to do about it. This is where we start embarking on the journey that leads to him becoming Remnant. So, you know, he's a stand-up guy, but a guy who's just tired of seeing things the way they are, and he wants to do something about it. And he's willing to go to the extent that he feels other people won't or can't do.
Got you. So a couple of things that you guys said, right? David, you said that one of the inspirations for this, like, you know, besides The Wire, would be maybe season 1 of Netflix's Daredevil. And that struck me because in my conversation with Christopher Priest, he talks about how his style is, say, more, to use his words, it's more Netflix Daredevil than CW Legends of Tomorrow. Like his goal is always a sort of real world or realistic take on what would happen if superheroes existed, right? And even a story that comes to mind is like Batman the Hill, where it's okay, yeah, what if Batman's in Gotham, but what about the south side of Gotham, right? Like what about, you know, if there's projects in Gotham, who's protecting those streets, and why is Batman not showing up there, right? So I just thought it was interesting that, you know, you use that same reference to Netflix Daredevil to kind of express the goal for realism and grittiness in the storytelling. And I think you're in good company there. But then the other thing, as you guys are explaining the character of Jamal, what his motivations are, even in some of his backstory, it reminded me of Wise Son from the Blood Syndicate. So like OG Milestone, and even the newest iteration by Jeff Thorne, that's Wise Son's origin, or partially, right? Like he grows up, he's into gang violence and stuff, or he's in a gang in Dakota City. He leaves, goes to the military, comes back, and the city is just sort of changed around him. And now he's trying to, you know, still trying to do the right thing, be an upstanding guy, but he's in an environment that is not conducive to that. And so it's like, well, what are you going to do to create the world you're trying to see? Now, you guys have made it a point to say that Jamal is not a hero. So what would you call him?
I mean, the people may call him a vigilante, but he just feels like to stop monsters, you have to become a bigger monster. And those monsters aren't just the streets, it's the politicians, it's corruption in the police department, it's whatever obstacles stand in the way of following the trail to make sure that what needs to be fixed is fixed in his mind, you know. So I guess the closest title we could give him would be an anti-hero or a vigilante, but he just feels like he's a person who's willing to put it all on the line and understands that once he goes here, there's no coming back. And he's okay with that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think the best way I could sum that up is, I forget the philosopher who said, I think it was Nietzsche, that if you stare into the abyss long enough, that you will become a monster. And I think in this sense, Jamal has stared into the abyss and saw that the only way to bring the city out of the abyss and bring it into the light, he too has to become a monster. Even though he knows that's like, I'm crossing lines and my soul is gone. I'm becoming something that is what is needed to shock the system to bring change. Knowing that what he's doing is not necessarily right. Well, it isn't right. He's breaking laws. He's crossing lines.
But crossing the lines in a place where he understands maybe the rules weren't correct in the first place, or at least the people in power to enforce them.
Right. I mean, you're dealing in a system that's corrupt. We're looking at a system that's corrupt in our story. And the only way you can, some people might say, the only way you can do away with a corrupt system, you've got to burn it down. And just burn it completely down, as Malcolm X, by any means necessary. And I think that is the best way to sum up Jamal. Now, that's not to say that we won't see Jamal have ethical and moral issues with some of the decisions he does. But we're also dealing with someone who's a veteran as well, who is dealing with PTSD from being in the military and from growing up in Lumberton, being around the violence and the crime, and so this is how do we balance this? How do we affect change? And the only way for Jamal to affect change is through his skills.
Absolutely. So Wolly, I mean, of course, I know you as an artist. I mean, every time we've met, you've literally either been drawing or selling drawings, right?
Yeah.
But this time you're in the writer's chair. What was it about this story that made you decide, like, I want to let someone else tell this visually?
Well, Danny puts a lot of pressure on me because I'm still working on King Supreme. And, to tell him I was drawing another book while King Supreme is still in progress, just, it probably wouldn't have worked out. I might have got fired from Bequest or something, might have had to become the janitor. I don't know. So I was like, David, it'd be wiser for us to find another artist, man, because I just don't want any smoke with those fourth wall guys,
As long as I've known Wolly has always had a goal to not. Wolly is a talented, passionate artist, but he has always had the goal to be not an art director, but to be, creating a team of artists or leading a team of artists. And I've seen, just growth in that area. And, Wolly also, back in the day, he had to have full control over what was being drawn and what was on every page. But now he's loosened up the reins a little bit. And that's just growth in general, man. And I love to see it. And I'm cheerleading for it. That's why I'm here being the assistant. You know what I'm saying? I'm just here to help these brothers out and help them move to the next level.
Well,
go ahead.
I mean, I had to really just, like Danny said, learn to let go, because how do you do everything and do it well? And I felt like this story was too solid, too strong to just sit and be stagnant, because I can't draw it right now. You know what I'm saying? And also understanding that maybe I'm not meant to draw everything. I feel like we found Solomon, his work was amazing. Me and David talked and went over different artists and had different ideas, and we went with Solomon, and he's done an amazing job, So, and I kind of enjoy that side of it, being able to focus more on the story and other details, and having someone else in the driver's seat as far as getting those panels done, because it's a lot. It's a lot drawing panels.
For sure. Now I won't ask you to name any of the artists that maybe Solomon beat out. Instead, I'll ask you guys what it was about Solomon's work that made you both go, yeah, this is the guy.
Well, I will give a shout out to Sean Arleen, who redesigned Remnant's costume from the original design that I had done. But we were trying to find a mesh of, I didn't want to go too cartoon-ish, but didn't want it to be realism either. So it was trying to find something that kind of teetered in that middle place, and something that would catch a traditional, someone who loves traditional Western comics and someone who loved anime and manga as well. And Solomon, you can tell his influences come from anime, graffiti, hip hop. Like, there's a lot of those elements in the way that he draws characters when they're walking across a page, or their interactions and expressions. So, for me, he just kind of embodied a lot of everything that I wanted to see on a page personally. And I just really liked his work. You know what I'm saying? There's stuff that he's drawn that just spoke with simple expressions on the face of the characters, and it was like, yo, I really dig that. You know what I mean?
Mm.
David might have felt different, but that's what brought me into him.
I think I think for me it was like when I looked at Solomon's work and the way that Wally described it. I'm a huge fan of the Boondocks, so I kind of saw some of the Boondocks and some of the way he drew some of the characters. And I felt if we did eventually go anime, we had a pretty good template of what we could use with the book. If we can get this to anime, if we can't get live action with it. And these are just ideas that we've been kicking around, Wally and I. But we felt that this would be a template if and when it came to a point, if we could do anime, we had a template to work with.
Gotcha. Yeah,
I was gonna get Danny to draw it, but he's still in his lesson stage, so I didn't really want,
I'm booked.
Well, I mean, we ain't got time for no stick figures.
I ain't got no room in the schedule. I got
big heads and small bodies, with big hands.
That's a design choice, that's a stylistic choice,
See, that's why you still a new artist. You're supposed to just say, that's my style, man. That's my style. You ain't supposed to say stylistic choices. That's
I'm getting it. I'm figuring it out.
Listen, man, you're further along than I am, and I had at least a 2-year head start. So anyway, for those who don't know, Danny got me started in digital art, quite literally.
I'm still waiting on that cover, man. I'm still waiting on that cover, bro.
Listen, man, maybe Ace Blade number 10.
Okay. All right. We're shooting for.
Right. So you've talked a little bit about the inspirations for the series. And when you talk about something like The Wire, right, it's a very pointed reference, right? Like what The Wire did so great at was making the city of Baltimore, or at least this version of the city of Baltimore, feel incredibly real, right? Like, and anyone I know from Baltimore says, yeah, it's like The Wire. So, for whatever that's worth. I don't know. I've never been there. That's not my story to tell.
Right.
But with that, I'm curious to know more about the world in Lumberton, right? Who are some of the supporting characters, and what's the overall feel of the city?
I mean, so Lumberton's very interesting because just like any city, there's a north, south, east, and west, but there's tracks that go down and divide. Once you cross those tracks, you're in what we call Southside 41 curve. And if you're from Lumberton, whether you live on that side of town or not, you're familiar with that place, that location, that name, 41. Just by saying 41, you're saying a lot of things. But just like anywhere else, there's grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts, uncles, but then there's also the other side of it. You know, the courthouse still has a Confederate statue in front of it. You know what I'm saying? So before you can go in to receive your justice, you got to walk past a Confederate statue paying homage to something that we're not going to see as a positive thing, no matter how you try to spin that situation. You know, it's not a big city, but there's a lot of love there. There's a lot of community there. You know what I mean? But just like anything, there's a lot of other activities and things that are happening continuously. Trailer parks, projects, homes with green grass and pretty yards, and but unfortunately a few years ago it was flooded. There was a storm that flooded a lot of Lumberton, especially the south side, but Lumberton in general. And people are still dealing with the repercussions or the aftermath of what happened as a result of that flood. So you know, there's everything you'd find anywhere else plus, but that's a key thing that we want to focus on heavy is the authenticity of it, the cars that are driven, the way that some homes are set up, the yards, the terminology, the way that people interact. You know, of course, there's spins that we'll put on certain things, but we want someone from there to see certain things or read certain things in a way that dialogue is happening and say, yeah, I know exactly what they're talking about. I know exactly where that is. You know what I mean? Because I think I would love to put Elton on the map the same way that Nipsey was helping to put Crenshaw, or the same way that, you know, some people take huge pride in the NY hat, whether they're from there or not. You know what I mean? Like that would be a huge goal, but also just to inspire a lot of the young cats coming up there to know you can come from wherever and still make an impact. You know what I mean? Because I did. I'm still making an impact and striving. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm still pushing. So, but yeah, the environment of Lumberton is very important. It is the South, very much so. You know, there's areas that feel more city and there's areas that feel more, you know, you can turn down this way and it's green pastures and farmland and whatever, and turn somewhere else and it's complete activity, everybody moving, you know what I mean? So, but it's a beautiful place when it all comes down to it.
Yeah, I mean, we've even, you know, we've, like Wally said, we've pulled in a lot of things that represent Lumberton into the book, even to the point where we have Jamal's own personal vehicle is a homage to Wally's father's
Yeah,
car.
77 Thunderbird.
Yep. You know, I mean, there's been times where I've sat down and some of the scripts and wrote in, a type of vehicle, and Wally's like, "No, they don't drive that Lumberton, man. No, no, no."
Yeah,
No
David had some 6.4s hitting switches. I said, nah, bro. That ain't it. But he also did his homework and put locations like Luther Brick Park in there, which anybody from the area will immediately know what that is. You know what I'm saying? I didn't even mention it to him. He was just like, yeah, I was doing some research, you know, and some of the supporting characters. Yeah, David, if I let David go, we'd have about 200 characters right now, but we scaled it back quite a bit. And, you know, Jamal's ex, Tamika, is a key character in the story. There's a guy named Frank who is loosely based on a real person from Lumberton whose name I won't say, but he's a businessman that gets into a lot of different businesses and makes a lot of things move and function. There's a guy named Turk who, for all intents and purposes, he's the epitome of somebody you don't want to be on the bad side of. You know what I mean? Like without any superpowers or any of that, that's unnecessary. He don't need that to make his point. You know, we try to walk into different aspects of life so that you can see the story from different points of view, different perspectives. We've got an older lady who's respected. She's like the candy lady of the neighborhood, but she was selling more than candy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But she's tapped into everything that's moving. Yeah, Danny, you know about that. You from the place with the wands and stuff? Where you from, Dan? I forgot. What's it?
Right. Candor, Bell Acres.
Yeah.
Plenty of candy ladies.
Yeah. You know, so and we try to pull things that relate to almost anybody that grew up almost anywhere in certain ways, you know, where you can say, oh, I remember that, or I know about that, or I had something like that where I was from, you know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of different people and moving parts kind of like how the wire moved through. You needed these different things to move you through these different aspects of the environment so that you could get a better understanding of what was going on and how it was happening.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, I was agreeing with him. Yeah, I mean that has been one of the journeys that we've gone through, is just trying to keep authentic. And me not being familiar with Lumberton, me constantly doing research to the point where Wally's like, "Hey man, you need to stop. You need to put the brakes on here." Trying to get an understanding of what Lumberton is like, researching the history of Lumberton. Especially when Wally brought up the flooding, going in and looking at those areas where flooding had taken place, looking at the homes to see the water damage, to see how some of them worked, and some of the neighborhoods that are still abandoned and haven't come back. Looking at trap houses and understanding how these houses look in Lumberton, and how people dress, and as Wally said, the words that they use. Because when I write, it's like pretty much the way I'm talking is how I write. And Wally's like, "Nah, man, we gotta take out a little few words here." And
You mean to tell me
Yeah.
they ain't quoting Nietzsche and Lumberton? They not?
no, they ain't coaching.
I mean,
Nietzsche
somebody might be, but it ain't everyday.
Okay.
It ain't everyday conversation, Like
yeah.
helping David to take some syllables out every once in a while, just because some people just trying to get to their point. You know what I mean? But also we want to give a shout out to Lumberton is also, there's a heavy population, Black and Native Americans there. So my wife's family is from Laurinburg, and some of her people were Brave Boys, Locklears. We want to make sure Davis is like, we're showing the community at full. You know what I'm saying? Like of course we're going to show Jamal, his family, and those that surround, but there's other groups that we want to make sure we give a voice to in certain ways as well.
Absolutely. So when you were talking just about the feel of Lumberton, right? Real life Lumberton, there's a warmth there that I don't know that people pick up on, right? Like I think we all love a good urban coming of age story, right? We all love a good hood movie, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's one of the things that's lost. So I've always been in the Raleigh area, but I grew up in a suburb called Wake Forest. And Wake Forest, very similarly to Lumberton, is divided by a railroad track. There's a railroad track that divides like the sort of suburban area from the more urban, historic downtown area. And, if you play rec league basketball, you played on the other side of the tracks, right? There's literally one gym with no AC where all the good ballers are. And then there's the other gym with the AC that, traditionally Black folks wasn't really at, right?
Right.
And I used to get my hair cut over there. And one thing that you notice when you're in environments like that is that they're very close knit. The woman who used to cut my hair, Miss Carolyn, I don't know if she's still alive. She was an old lady even back then. But she's cutting hair. She's got a super sharp eye, and she's watching people walk across the street. She's seeing cars pass by. She's seeing certain activity on the corner, and she knows every person that walks by. And it's like, oh, and she's never identifying them by their names. It's
Right.
like, oh, there's Sally's little boy. He always up to something, and this and that, right? But there's, again, this close knit vibe that you get, this feeling that even in an environment that to any outsider is going to look super sketchy and unsafe, but it just feels like home.
Right.
How does an aspect like that get captured in this book?
Different ways. The candy lady, who's very much like the lady that you mentioned, except that maybe some of her activities ventured a little deeper into the environment. But even seeing her care for Jamal, her interaction with Jamal, or her talking about her family and her people, there's little things as we build out the story that will be implemented. Even like I remember there's some projects there called Lumbee Homes, And I remember there was this lady who had a spot on the corner, and you could tell she had been there for a long time because the whole entire surroundings of her crib, her location was just plant life.
Mm.
So she took care of it as someone as deeply as someone who had bought a house and land and done whatever to it. She did the same thing in the projects,
Mm.
because our projects there aren't necessarily stacked up like you would think of a New York or whatever, but they're
Yeah.
more spread out.
Mhm.
And so she beautified everything about it. And so, just moments like that will be important and key to certain aspects as we're building out scenes and scenery. And because it's a smaller place, it doesn't, you go to Baltimore or somewhere, you can tell it's an older city. It's a beautiful city in certain aspects, but you can tell like there's certain parts of it that are just older. It's been there for a long time.
Mhm.
There's a certain peacefulness, cleanliness to some of the smaller areas, but there's also a certain time trap. You might turn a corner and there's this building that that building was probably there when my great grandparents were moving around here. You know what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
just trying to find different ways like that to let the environment speak to people for itself, as much as the words that are on the page or the expressions of the characters. And even through certain different characters, like I said, you start to get a vibe for the world and for the way that things move there.
Yeah.
There's something about authenticity too that can give it that feeling, right? That you feel more on the pages because it's authentic. I know we talk a lot on social media about, the dangers of AI and, mass. And then also there's this thing about appealing to the masses and, all these kind of things. But I think, especially with the stuff that we do in Bequest Studios, yes, you can appeal to a large group of people, but there's something valuable in being able to connect with a niche audience, a group of people who identify with something because it's real, because it has an authenticity. And if you have creators who have lived or experienced things in their real lives and they put them into work, the people who also have lived adjacent to those lives can see it and they can feel it, and you can hear it in the music that's being made around this project. You can see it in the art. You can hear it in how they talk about it, and just like you said, there's things that people from the outside wouldn't see or wouldn't notice about a place like Lumberton that you can see in a project like that. And I think that's dope. And that's one of the reasons that we are doing this whole thing with Bequest Studios, because nobody can tell our stories like we can. Nobody's going to be able to get that authentic story out. Even though we might not have the traditional industry connections, we're building our own connections through different avenues, through these communities that haven't been, shown on in these medias. Who would make a comic book vigilante superhero story based on Wally's real life, because he is a superhero. You know what I'm saying? I've seen Wally do some superhero stuff. You know what I'm saying? And they changed his name to Jamal in the book, but that's really Wally from what I heard. So, who else would do that?
There's a few people rolled in that guy. David,
Okay.
my cousin Adam, you know what I'm saying? I'm a small piece. But then he's right. Like there's a lot of intentional things. The color of his costume, which you'll see that color pop up here and there a few times, the black and gold, that's a color that's actually used by a school in the area. You know what I'm saying? My dad also had a jacket that was black and gold, black and yellow, like those. There's things that will be super cool Easter eggs that certain people will catch, and certain things that people will just look at and have no clue. It'll just be whatever it is, you know what I mean? Until we talk and say things about it. But then there'd be things that'll hit home for people from there that'll be like, I know exactly what that's about. I know exactly what they're talking about when they show that, you know. Um, but yeah, don't get it twisted. There's a good part of David in there too. You know, the military aspect, certain human traits, which has been a cool part of the balance, trying to make sure that Jamal is well balanced, but also that you started to get the idea that he's very different from a lot of people who may have gone through some of the things that he's gone through. And the fact that he went through what he went through as a kid, growing up where he did, positioned him differently than someone else who might have just went off to war or went off to whatever and had never dealt with certain things before. So, you know.
Oh, that's awesome. I think something that you hit on, um, it's really just about realism versus voyeurism. I think there's always going to be something that's, for whatever reason, appealing to people about being able to live vicariously through people who they view as dangerous or maybe even just courageous or bold in a way that they don't feel themselves. And so we love Training Day. We love Menace to Society. We love stuff like that. But bringing that realism to it helps to sort of bring in or usher in a sense of humanity and really tell a truthful story, one that, might not always be easy to look at, but is necessary and hopefully pushes the conversation forward in a meaningful way.
Yeah. I want to say something too, man. I normally don't speak on or get into it with internet cats, man, because that's just a no-win battle unless you actually catch a person outside or something. But someone had made a comment on another interview we did, and I really don't read the comment. I try to stay away from comments as much as I can, unless Danny send it to me because he trying to bait me into getting into it with these folks. But a cat had made a comment that if the what he saw the book felt reminiscent of the 90s, and he didn't like that because he felt like the 90s fell apart and yada yada yada. And there's a piece of that in there because we come from that era, and some of that's intentional and subconscious, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And he also made the comment to somebody else like, well, how long is Jamal going to be able to lose a piece of himself before the piece is gone? And I just want to say to that young brother, if he happens to watch this, like, I mean, how long is Batman going to mourn his parents, or how long is the Punisher going to mourn his wife, or, you know what I mean? Like, that is just part of what gets it started. There's always the movement to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. You know what I mean? When they were lost on the island on the TV show, they were just trying to figure out how they got there first. Then it turns to all these other adventures as it continued to go along. You know what I mean? Gargamel's still trying to find Smurf Village. So just give it a shot. Tap in, see what we're talking about, and see where it goes. And then you'll get the answer as to how long a person can lose a piece of themselves. You know what I mean? But what happens after that piece is gone? What does that person become then? But I understand people got to have something to talk about. You know what I mean? And it probably helps us in the long run because maybe it got other people thinking. But, we got a good idea about what we're doing, what we want to do. We're not just one-trick ponies and throwing something out there like, yo, he's going to lose himself for 22 issues. Like, nah. Once that piece is gone, it becomes something else. And that's a part of the transition that we prep for. So,
for sure. That reminds me of, again, another milestone reference, right? I'm full of them. But Hardware, right? Hardware's journey very much starts out as a journey about vengeance and becomes a journey for justice, right? Like, there are plenty of ways to motivate a character to continue in a pattern of behavior or, to start a new one. My man Danny's over here like, hey, look at me. I got Hardware.
The super rare titanium vibranium edition?
I think officially it's the platinum variant.
Okay.
But yeah, so I mean, there's plenty of, like you said, Batman's been fighting crime for 30 years and recruiting teenage, child labor all along for different reasons, but for the same reason. So definitely plenty of ways to motivate character and to get that to learn how Jamal continues to be motivated to continue as the Remnant, you got to go back this campaign. The campaign for issue number 1 does end on June 22nd. Really, it ends on the 21st because I don't know who's going to be up at 8 a.m. necessarily to go and back the campaign. So again, Friday, June 21st, your last day to back this campaign. Please do so. You got about a week from the time you're hearing this. And this story is planned for 6 issues, you said?
6 issues is the first story arc, but we've already mapped out beyond that.
Awesome. So listen, if we want to get to issue 7 and beyond, it starts with issue 1. So go back the campaign. You can go to comicsaredope.com/Lumberton to back the campaign. And I'll be super glad that you did. We didn't even get into the rewards. And quite honestly, we don't have a lot of time to, but there are several variant covers that you can grab. There's a t-shirt, which has Southside 41 Curb. So you got that there. That's dope. There's actually 2 different t-shirts you can choose from. And did you say there's music involved with this project?
Yeah. So anybody that pledges to any of the tiers, once the campaign ends, you'll get the 11, I think it's 11. You'll get the soundtrack, which is featuring nothing but artists from the area.
Nice. That's crazy. That's dope. And then there's a documentary about this in the works as well.
Yes, sir.
And there's a limited edition statue. Okay. I said I wouldn't get into the rewards, but this is crazy. I'm excited about this. So plenty of ways to get in, plenty of reasons to get in, plenty of perks involved for those who decide to get in on the ground floor of this new project. So definitely take a look. Again, you can go to comicsaredope.com/Lumberton to back L-Ton #1. I want to say thank you to my man Wolly McNair, to David Rucker, and to Danny Quick for joining us for this episode. You guys have any last things y'all want to plug?
Hey man, we keep this independent movement moving by the support of the people. So, we're doing it to be for the people. We are of the people. Your support helps, you know what I mean? So tap in with us. And it keeps Danny, happy as the CEO of Bequest and the assistant of David Rucker. You know what I'm saying? You got to keep those positions moving.
I got 8 jobs, man. Nah, man, I always, BJ, man, I want to say thank you, man. Your content, your weekly pull lists, keep me informed. I love the dope interviews. You got Christopher Priest, man. You always killing the game. But to the audience, man, just make sure you read something dope today.
Yeah. So he did a sign off for me. I didn't got to do it.